Good evening at 6 o'clock, Council Chambers, City of Marshfield, Thursday, June 27th, for a special council meeting for the CIP. Call to order, roll call. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item C, public comment period correspondence. At this time, I will recognize members of the audience who have indicated a desire to address the council. Upon recognition by me, persons may address the council, first stating their name and address. The council may act on emergency matters introduced by members of the audience. Are there any public comments? Are there any public comments? Number 3, public comments. Seeing none, on to item D. Review staff changes since June 20th meeting. Tom Turchi, Director of Public Works. Good evening, Tom.
Good evening. The first correction is on page 17, which is administration for taxi. And what we had done was we had removed the one van from 2025 and brought that down to $75,000. And then in 27, 28, and 29, we upped from one per vehicle to 2 vehicles for the last 3 years for that project. The next change was page 39, in which, let's see, under development services, I think that's the incorrect. It's actually 37, not 39. We removed the reference to the $100,000 of the APRA funds for the first year because those funds have been reallocated. And that's for the affordable housing program. So the next change we had was on page 74, and that had to do with engineering on a sanitary sewer project, or sanitary sewer lining. We added $250,000 to 2025. And if you're kind of seen what we've done in the past with those, what we do is we try to combine 2 years, do a end of year bidding where we can put 2 years together and we get better bid prices and for the lining projects. On page 82, let's see, 74. Okay, so their pages are off by 2. And because we sent out a new link, so if you're using the paper version, you're going to find it's off by 2 pages.
Positive or negative?
Let's see.
I'm apologizing.
So
positive. So it should
positive.
be 77.
So add 76.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
that up.
25. Yeah.
Sorry.
No problem. Thanks for asking. I'm glad you clarified that. Page 82 or 84 for your books. We had Vine Avenue 2nd to 4th. We moved the $15,000 for engineering services to 2026 and ultimately moved the construction services to 2028 to coincide with the street construction work. Originally, this project was planned for 2025 and we ended up getting grant funding, so we have to move the sanitary sewer to coincide with the street construction. And finally, the last one was on page 115, which is the 117 in yours, which is the street department. And it was the electrical upgrade for the street department. What we did was the description and the justification were actually for a roof project. It must have gotten copied over into the documentation. So it is corrected to be for the electrical project, not the roof project. Nope, that's the electrical work for the street department.
Oh, and it's not 117. Yep, it would be.
Let's see. I'm sorry, 154 or 150. I wrote down the wrong one. Sorry about that. Yep, 156. Basically, the justification we originally had was for a roof project, but it actually was for the electrical service, so we had to change the justification and the description of the project. That's about the only thing. The numbers stayed the same and the year stayed the same. And those are all the changes from the last meeting.
Any questions, comments? Seeing none, review proposed projects by function. Those not covered at the June 20th meeting will first invite up emergency medical services.
All right, what we'll do is I'll just continue with the same method that we used earlier, and I'll go through the projects. If you have a specific question, we have our chiefs here for answering questions. The first project for emergency medical services is the fire department ambulance power load systems, and that is $44,000 scheduled for 2026.
Page number?
I'm sorry, page 39 here, so it'd be 41 in your book. The second one is the fire department extraction tools, and that is on page 42 or 40, and that is $46,000 for 2025 and $50,000 for 2028. The next project is the fire department Lucas device cardiac compression unit. And we have $23,000 for 2025 and $26,000 for 2028. And then the fire department patient cot for the ambulance, that is $40,000 for 2027. The next project is the stair chair for the ambulance. We have $18,000 for 2025 and $22,000 for 2028. Then we have an ambulance number 99 at $320,000 for 2026. Then the next project is the cardiac monitor for $55,000 in 2027. The following project is the ambulance 96 for $350,000 in 2029. And the final project in emergency medical services is the ambulance 96 cot power load system for $50,000 in 2029.
Any questions, comments? Seeing none? Yes, Alderman Spiros?
I have a couple of questions. So I'm going back to, let's see here. I'm going back to page 42 in the book version. And it is the extraction tools to replace aging equipment. So it says you currently have 4 sets of aging extraction tools and 5 ambulances. The extraction tools are like the jaws of life?
That is correct. They're the extrication tools.
Okay, and those are on your ambulances, not, okay. So we already have 4 ambulances with extraction tools. The 5th ambulance does not have any?
It does not. That is our transfer vehicle.
That is what?
The transfer vehicle.
Okay.
It basically is equipped with light equipment.
Okay, so this $46,000 is to do what exactly? Is that to replace one extraction tool? Is that all 4 of them?
That's the complete set.
Complete set. Okay, that's what I needed to know on that.
You bet.
The next page, 43, how many of these cardiac compression devices do we currently have in service?
We have 5.
We have 5, okay. And then, so you're saying that one of those have basically expired or reached their life?
Correct. Usually about a 15-year life expectancy on all of those.
Okay.
On our equipment, that's what we have is on a 15-year rotation.
Okay, and so the 23,000, that's just to replace the one that's expiring?
One device, yes, with the battery. The battery is the bigger piece of that.
Okay. I think that might be it. Let me. So on page 47, the cardiac monitor,
Yes,
so is this the same sort of story? Now, you're not doing that until 2027,
that is
but
correct.
is that, how many of those do we have?
Those, we have 5.
So one on each ambulance?
That is correct.
Okay, and one is expiring in
One
2027?
would be expiring. It'd be the replacement of one on a 15-year rotation.
Okay, so that's to replace one, and it's on a 15-year. Okay. All right, I think that's all I had.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you, Mayor. This is more of a procedural question for the chiefs. Do you guys present a budget to the Fire and Police Commission as a whole, and they authorize you to bring this to the council?
We do. Yes, we do.
Okay, so they've reviewed the requests and everything here, right?
Correct. On the CIP process, we'll be bringing that up in the next month. There was a little delay in the CIP process, but that will be going. And the budget, it'll be at the same time. The budget will also be at that same meeting.
Okay, let's see, there's one other thing. Oh yeah, you got one thing in here for devices for use in the training out at the training grounds on the south end of the city. Can't you get those donated? Can't you get money donated for those things?
I believe that was going to be in the next presentation, Alderman Wagner. That's in the fire department side of it. This is the EMS, but if you want to talk about that, I can certainly talk about it. Okay. When it comes to the training facility, that's a shared agreement. That is a 10-year agreement. We started that agreement with Mid-State Technical College about 10 years ago. That is a 50-50 match. Some part of that comes out of the EMS and some part comes out of fire protection, or the 101 general fund. And then the $25,000 also comes from Mid-State Technical College. That was an agreement that we came with. And what we're looking to do is build that training center out. Those meet the ISO requirements. We need to have a three-tier tower down there to meet the ISO requirements. That's what we're trying to work towards. And a lot of this money has been for infrastructure and trying to work towards that infrastructure. I do like your idea of working towards a private donation system, and that's something we're going to work on in the future. But for the interim, we're looking to build that out utilizing these funds to at least get that process started.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you. Can you refresh our memory? If we are borrowing for the EMS program, does the EMS fund pay us back?
I'm going to defer that to finance. That's a question that's going to be more for them and suited for them.
Are you asking specifically for this, this training piece
No,
where,
Like
or
ambulance, supplies for ambulance, things like that? Does that ever get paid back out of the EMS fund?
okay, so they don't borrow for those items. Those have been paid for out of their fund. There's no borrowing for an ambulance or any of those devices that they have in the CIP.
Okay, so even though it's in the CIP, we're not borrowing money for these?
Right. So if you look in your book, part of what is explained is where the funding is coming from. So when it says fees EMS, that's their own fees from their fund going to pay for those purchases.
Perfect, thank you.
Alderman Werman?
Thank you. I just wanted to check because I know nothing about the cost of an ambulance. So the $320,000 in 2026, and obviously I'm assuming we're adjusting for possible inflation for $350 in 2029. What comes with that ambulance? I'm assuming, are we buying new, and then does that include everything we need for the ambulance? Like I'm thinking in terms of like Ms. Spiros was just asking about equipment that goes into it. That base cost, does that include that type of equipment so that we would have extras, or?
That does not. That's why those additional, like the power load cot, that would be part of an expenditure that would need to be above and beyond. The life pack would need to be above and beyond. pretty much everything we went over this evening would need to be above and beyond. What comes with that unit is basically the basic package, which would be the chassis and then the box that goes on the back, and any electronic equipment that would go in between that would be for the ambulance itself.
Are we ordering new vehicles then? I would assume so.
We are.
Okay.
That's been best practice, and it seems to be, it fits our system the best. Just the fact that we have low mileage and we can start from a zero.
Absolutely. Do we order so that they're customizable? I know it's a ways out, but just looking at like that power cot or the cot power loader system, is that possible where we could order a customized version and, you know, cut out having to do 2 separate line items and you can include that in the cost? I guess I don't know who we go through and if that's possibilities, but if there's options for discounts like that where it would be cheaper, just thought it might be an option.
Typically, those are broke out. Unfortunately, the power load cot system actually goes with the cot, and the cot typically doesn't come with the ambulance. So those have always been purchased separate, just because that's the industry standard. So for the ambulance itself, we typically go and it is a specific chassis where we and that's kind of how the industry puts that together. Each apparatus is built for what your spec is, and that's kind of that industry, how that operates. You get the Ford chassis, then they go ahead and they put the box, assemble the box, and put all the electronics in to make it what we need for an ambulance.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none. Proceed, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Everett.
All right, on page 97 or 98, if you have the paper copy, we'll go into the fire department projects. And the first one is the fire department training facility props and projects. Again, it's $50,000 a year for every year within the CIP. And the EMS fund pays $6,250. Grants are $25,000 and long-term debt is $18,750 each of those years. The next project is the fire department car 6 replacement. That's for $113,000 in 2025. Then we have Squad 1 preemptive lighting and radio and cradle for 2025 at $20,000. And then we have the fire department fire alarm panel replacement in 2026 for $46,000. And that basically wraps up all the items in the agenda for the CIP. If there's any questions for the fire department items, we can answer those for you.
Any questions, comments from the council? Alderman Spiros?
Pardon my ignorance. The car 6 replacement is $113,000. Why is a car so expensive? And I'm sure there's a reason, but I'm just asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. When you look at the vehicle itself, what their projected costs are, and this is coming from B&H, that's one of our systems that we basically go for government pricing. They're looking at about $61,000, about $60,276, somewhere in there. But we kind of factored in about $61,000 to make sure we had the coverage and make sure that we had the percentage increases for inflation. When you start going into the package of the vehicle itself, you get into the electronic package, that's going to be an expense. Even just the radio by itself is about $10,000 for the Motorola radio that we need to communicate with dispatch and also communicate with other units. That's going to be a UHF, VHF dual band. Allows us to communicate with our handle or portable radios as well as other VHF ones. In addition, we got Cradle Point on there, which gives us the internet and the Wi-Fi connection that we need to run our computer. We do run a computer in there that does our IM responding and some of our communication equipment inside the vehicle. The other thing is this is going to be a replacement for Car 6. Car 6 is actually our main plowing vehicle for the fire department. We do our own plowing, so that's going to be another plow package that we're going to put on that vehicle as well. So that would be a part of that replacement. We want to make sure that we try to build in duplicity on all of our vehicles as well. We're going with an F-250 because we have trailers that need to be hauled. We also have the ability to do that. For instance, we're going to be taking Squad 1 out of service shortly, and that's going to be going in for the rehab. Refurbishment of that vehicle, and those we need to make sure we have multiple vehicles to be able to pull that. Right now we currently have 2. That'll leave us kind of limited if something were to happen or a break-in, so we have to make sure we cover for those things in case we do have any breakdowns or anything, so we have something to back it up.
Okay, so it's an F-250 that
It
you're
is.
buying.
That's
And
correct.
so you've got the base cost of the F-250 at whatever you said it was, or maybe you didn't even say.
Yeah, I can get the exact price here.
But the increase on that is basically your essentials that you need. It's the upgrades that you're putting in.
That's
Now, one question about the plow system. How come you can't take the plow system off of the car you're the truck you're retiring and put it on the new?
The older plow, that one's already about 7 or 8 years old. That plow, what we want to do is build in duplicity, making sure that we have another plow just in case that one breaks down. We do take care of all of our own plowing, and it's hard to kind of take care of that if we don't have something there to take care of it.
So you're keeping the old plow and you're getting a new plow.
Right.
Okay, and then I just want to talk about the training facility props and projects.
Absolutely.
It's $50,000 every year, which I see, long-term debt is, or, $18,750. But I just don't, what do you spend 50 grand on every single year?
When you look at the training tower and the training package, some of that money is being combined. It's an account where it can roll over each year. So in some cases, we have to save funds so that we can put funds towards bigger projects. And what that is that's an agreement between Mid-State Technical College and the Marshfield Fire Department or City of Marshfield.
Right.
25,000 of that is actually from Mid-State Technical College. That's kind of their portion of it.
Right.
So it's really the 25,000 that would be their side. 18,250 is ours. And I can give you some projects that we worked on. We put together one of our sheds down there. Basically, turned it into a place where we can have inclement weather. So in case we have wintertime and we can't train outside, and this is also for Mid-State Technical College. So we're trying to meet both needs for this training center. So we meet the needs of those, and we've got that facility. We've also done some upgrades to our training tower, which is a 3 or 4 tier tower that has the ability. Now we've got some different safety features that are on that, and I can certainly take you down and show you those anytime you'd like. I can walk anybody through anytime, just give me a call. And we've got other things that we've been working on. We're looking at infrastructure and a master plan for down there so that we can build that facility out. And like Alderman Wagner had requested, why can't we do this with some of the private donation money? That's something we certainly want to look into.
Sure.
Because when we look at like a building, just for a fire tower building, you're about $1.1 million for that building. So everything when it comes to the fire service seems to be expensive, but we also have to put fire, we have to be able to burn inside that tower. So those expenditures are going to be there, and we're going to try to get private donations to get farther than this
Gotcha.
contract.
Oh, it just seems like so much money. When you see it every year, I'm like, my goodness, what are you building out there?
Absolutely.
But just your explanation of what a tower cost, I guess that kind of sums that up. All
You bet, it continues to add up. So we're definitely trying to work through those things.
right, thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Any other questions, comments? You can proceed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that kind of wraps up all the items from the CIP. If there's any questions, possible changes or concerns, we're here to answer or address those. Unless there's an idea that you'd like to try to approve it this evening, that's also an opportunity for you, so.
And by approval, what we're referring to is sending it to the council to a regular meeting for final approval. But we definitely, as Tom said, want to get out any questions, discussion, concerns, possible changes, that you're looking at, like to move something up, move something back. This is your time to voice those particular issues.
Alderman Spiros?
Okay. The CIP, is difficult. I think it's difficult every single year because it comes out before the budget comes out, which makes it really hard. But with that said, I do want to bring up a couple of things. The Jurassic Park, moving the exhibit to, I forget, where are we putting it? Wildwood. $3.75 million to move it, which I see we don't have planned until, we're splitting that between 27 and 28. I'm concerned with that amount of money. I love Jurassic Park, but that is a lot of money. Why is that so much money? I mean, talking almost $4 million.
I agree 100%. That's a lot of money. Right now, it's being privately fundraised, so the no tax dollars right now are going to be committed to it. There's a committee still doing the design process. They're hoping to wrap that up hopefully this summer. There's been some delays with just kind of getting on the same page between a few parties, but they're close. I wanted to put this on the radar for the council so it was no surprises moving forward. I really have no idea, but right now the design is estimated around that point. It's moving all of those pieces from there, which is going to be expensive, to Wildwood, and then providing some sort of infrastructure, number one, for safety and security of the structures and safety security for the visitors, and then making it a visitor's destination. So I wanted to put it on the radar. It may move back. It may not happen if there's not enough private fundraising that goes into place, but I didn't want the council to be caught off guard with this large ticketed price. I'm hoping to get more concrete numbers at the end of this year, but I figured let's put it in the CIP since it's private dollars. Hopefully it doesn't become too much of a shock to the public, but that's where we're at with that plan.
Okay, so there's an active campaign going to raise the money to.
Well, right now they know it's going to be privately fundraised. I told them I don't think the city or the county or anyone's going to have the palate to kind of fundraise or pay for that. So private donations are going to have to be the leader in that project.
Got you.
And they're not quite to the finish line with their design yet. So,
Okay.
But I wanted to put it on the radar.
Got you. And then just a couple of follow-ups to it. How do you know how many pieces are being transferred? And I mean, it just seems like the last time I was out there, they have a lot of pieces. Are we taking every piece, or we're taking selective pieces?
Some, Clyde and Nancy have committed to other people, whether it's family members or friends or whatever, who have committed to those pieces. Some are still for sale, but we're not taking all of them. Hard to put the number on. I think it's around 50 to 75 pieces. Some are rather large and some are rather small. So the part of the challenge will be this architect will have to design it so it makes sense. So
And then-
taking a large piece with a small piece and then doing all
Right,
that.
and so then they're all going to go at Wildwood,
Mhm.
and you have to put some sort of a foundation to place them on, I'm assuming?
Yeah, you don't want them to fall over, whether
Right.
it's wind or human interference, so they'll be secured to the ground so they won't be able to tip over.
And you feel pretty good that there's enough space to put that many?
That's where the engineer and architects will be challenged in how to make that fit.
Okay. Okay. I'll yield the floor to the next question.
Alderman Wagner?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to make it clear to the chiefs that my biggest concern about, the what seems like a small amount of money for the training towers and the toys and things that go in with it. But it's the source of the money that I'm concerned about. I don't think that should be taken out of long-term debt. I don't think there should be any long-term debt for that. So I just wanted to get that objection on the record.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Wow. Yes, Alderman Spears.
Sorry.
No, don't never be sorry.
At what point, and I think I've seen this on the agenda, but I need to ask, at what point are we discussing the police station?
That comes up under item H.
Yeah, although I will admit, if you look at the order here, the intent was if the council would see fit to include that in the proposed borrowing, or the proposed capital improvement plan, the next item would be to tackle how we're going to evaluate whether or not you're going to make a decision in favor of moving forward. So, I mean, you can do whatever you want to with that item in terms of including it at this point. But if this ends up being the capital improvement plan that you approve, and it's our guidebook in terms of moving forward to plan for borrowing, to plan for how we're going to move projects in what order, we would definitely want to start the process or restart the process of looking at the plan that ADCI brought forward to us and, talking about the next steps to evaluate whether or not this project is actually going to move ahead.
Okay, so, and I kind of feel that's a little out of order, but that's just my opinion. And then the amounts here are much lower than what I thought was predicted, the cost. Because this is 10.8 million together, but I thought the cost was going to be higher than that.
Yes, you're right. Well, first of all, I'll fix some of that because there's a typo that never goes in our direction. Instead of 820, it's actually 860 for the blueprint and design. Someday we're going to get one that goes in our favor.
Sure.
So with the team that we've had working on this project, we looked at those conceptual designs. Remember, the designs that we brought forth were just basically to see that if a police department would work in that position. They were really conceptual. And I mean, if I could choose a police department, yeah, we would have one. But unless I can have pickleball in a shooting range, it's probably gonna have to make some sacrifices. So we looked at the potential that we could maybe downsize in some areas and compromise some areas and probably come to a little bit better pricing. So this is where we thought we would end up.
Once you're moved, if this gets approved, once you're moved, then we would put the other station up for sale?
That would be at your discretion. I don't know. We wouldn't need it for our purposes once we're in the new building.
Right.
So that would be up to what you guys would do. The only thing that we would potentially have to work out, and again, we're maybe putting the cart in front of the horse, but we have the impound garage that's up here. We probably would do a stages where we would replace that when we need to rather than all at one time. So the impound garage is at the end of First Street.
Yeah. So, and then this projected cost for the building, does that include a garage to park your vehicles in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
That's all I have until I get to a new page. Sorry.
Alderman O'Reilly?
Thank you. Yeah, going through this process, I'm going to kind of allude to what Rebecca had said earlier. We get some good information, we get some good discussion, but in my opinion, it's kind of useless because it is an ever-changing document and we have no budget information. We still do not have our audit back. And what's really frustrating is that was over a month ago that Alderman Spiros asked for that back and we were told we'd have what you have now in about a week. I still have not seen that. I'm wondering what is going on here. What I mean,
with the final audit report.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand from that meeting, that we were going to have what you guys have the following week. I think it's more than patient. It's just when you're developing a list of potential future projects and you have no idea where you're sitting financially, it's nothing more than a Christmas list to me. And I have trouble approving or disapproving anything because it's just a list of wants. And it just seems to me like everything in the process is backwards. We should have at least a projected, I mean, I understand you may not be to the point where you have down to the dimes and nickels, but the reality is at this point, I would think we should be able to project a range potentially that would get us somewhere close. So we know what we're doing, but by throwing all this stuff in there, it's just going to frustrate people later as we have to cut it if that's the case. I don't know. The whole process to me makes no sense the way we're going about it. And I just wanted to share that because without having our financial information or even projected ideas on this, it's difficult for me to really put any faith in doing this.
I'll let the audit issue stand on its own. I mean, we wish that we had the final audit report now, and we can talk about that in a minute. But, you know, we've always had the CIP in the spring and then the budget in the fall. And I don't think we're really that different than most communities. Most communities do not have them at the same time. I don't think you'd be wanting to look through a capital list of millions and millions of dollars at the same time that we're talking about the budget for the library and so forth. I mean, you'd be overwhelmed, you'd be knocked out. The intention for this is that we identify priorities. And we understand that if it comes down to, you know, September, October, whatever, and the dollars just aren't there, that there may be projects in this list for 2025 that fall out. We get that. But this seems to be a time away from the budget process to say, look, here's what we're intending to do. What do you think of the priorities? Are these good projects? Dollars permitted, of course, dollars available. We'd like to see it done in this order. Move this back to 2027. Get this off the 25 radar. those kind of decisions, as opposed to the meat and potatoes of those final dollars. I get the frustration, but I really don't think you want to be looking at this at the same time that you're looking at the budget document. I think you want to have a thought in mind that these are the things we want to do in the capital world if we get to the point and the dollars are there.
Yes.
That's my perspective.
I understand. I guess what I was getting at, you start looking at items like the police station, that's going to fall entirely in a different priority spot for me, depending on where this goes. It can change the entire direction of the whole thing, in my opinion. Although I'm not asking for the final audit report and everything, I just think some type of a report, where are we setting from last year? What is our estimated cuts, or how much excess do we have that we can afford to do some of these things? It frustrates me. I just wanted to share that because it's really frustrating that we were supposed to have what you guys have already a month ago.
I guess I'm trying to think back to that conversation. Was it suggested that we were going to provide some sort of preliminary information? Okay. Can we do that? I guess is the question. I know there's still some work being done on the auditor's end. I look to you for direction on that, Jennifer.
Okay, so the status of the audit report is that it is not complete. We finished our field work the third or fourth week of March, and it has been in the audit firm's hands since then. We received a very preliminary rough draft, not meant for public consumption or distribution, about a month ago. My communication today was that there was still some questions from the second partner level review that they wanted to take a closer look at. I had anticipated receiving this report 2 weeks ago, but that was the latest communication from today. As far as preliminary reports, we did go through that at budget meeting number 1, where I went through the various funds from a preliminary level. At some point, I believe I displayed when we were talking about borrowing, the projection of our current borrowing and our where we stand today plus our 2024 borrowing and what that would look like. I believe we also talked about a potential, what it would look like in terms of what we would need to levy if we added a police building with that borrowing to occur in 2025 and 2026. That information isn't perfect information because it was incorporating our CIP plan from 2024 to 2028, but then we just dropped that building in to see a potential scenario. So you have had a peek at that information, and if I need to bring that up at a, individually or at a subsequent meeting, we can certainly review all of that. My intention, if you do a soft approval of this CIP plan, would then be to submit that to our financial advisor, whereby they would plug that into a potential payment schedule going forward. And that's where we need to give them direction on how much we want to levy in terms of the debt portion of the levy, which we control to some extent. And where we want to take that. So each year we do borrowing, we build another layer into that potential levy. Putting in a police station at that level puts our levy near probably just a skosh over $6 million a year, and right now we're bumping up against $5 million. So we can certainly, if you give a soft approval of the plan, bring that back in probably a 2 weeks time period. The advisors are out selling bonds and notes right now, so it's hard to get a turnaround on that. But certainly I can bring that up either as a staff item, separate budget meeting, a separate agenda item, whatever your preference is. Sure.
Alderman Spiros, then Alderman Wagner. Alderman Spiros first, then Alderman Wagner.
Okay, so Steve, something that you mentioned in reply to Mike was, that these are priority rated. How many priority ratings do we have? Because every single thing on this list is either a 1 or a 2, except for one thing. That was the cemetery road maintenance was listed as a priority 3. How many steps do we have in our priority
See, Tom wants to
scale?
take this one.
There's actually 4. I don't have it in front of me, but we have a little priority that things to maintain and keep going is a higher priority than something that's a brand new service or a brand new entity that's going to take funding from us in the long term. So we basically have a rating system for the types of priorities, and I can forward that to you here tomorrow.
Okay.
It's basically a matrix, is it not?
Yeah, it's a matrix.
We've had that in previous books.
Yeah.
Okay. I just kind of wonder because, yeah, like I said, everything is a 1 or a 2 except for one thing.
And truly, as Tom indicated, and you're going to see us in those higher categories because those are the important maintenance issues. We're not bringing many new programs or services to you, so you're not going to see things in those lower categories.
Got you. So the last thing I want to bring up is the vehicle replacement schedule that we use. So we're using it pretty much in all departments, I think, a rotational schedule, right?
There's some planning tools for that. The 701 account, if you're talking about the vehicles for like the street department and those are different than police department or fire department. But
Okay,
go ahead.
so there's different ways that you guys do
Yes.
that. Okay. I guess I'm just going to make an unpopular statement here. I feel like our vehicle replacements are too close together. I think that we need to spread that scale out a little bit. And I understand, well, we're doing this because we get a better trade-in value, or we're doing this because we have less miles and all of that kind of stuff. And I understand why we did it this way originally, but these vehicles are just getting more and more and more pricey. And, our revenue has not gone up as quickly as the cost of all these vehicles. And yes, I know that we, that we borrow for these vehicles, but I feel like somehow that scale has to be bumped out a year or 2. Like we need to keep our vehicles a year or 2 longer than what we're doing.
Okay, just to clarify, I'm not sure if you're talking about the police department vehicles, fire department vehicles, or like city vehicles in general. The city vehicles in general are purchased through the 701 account. And what we do is that's an account where we rent, basically, if we're using a vehicle for a certain process or a backhoe, that gets charged back time and materials. So it's kind of a more of a builds up an account, and we want to keep that one solvent. So we limit that to a certain number of purchases per year, and then we can determine what's the highest priority within that, the whole list of vehicles that we have, and determine when it's time to replace them. For example, if I take and I'll just use, I'm trying to locate that quick. Surveying vehicle, we have a 1999 Suburban that we use as a surveying vehicle. I know it's in the program, so that vehicle is now approaching 25 years old, and what Tim does is he looks at what the maintenance records are, how often are we taking it in to be maintained, how many miles are on it, is it costing us a lot to own it, or can we hang on to it for a while? So for that fund, we're looking at things quite a bit differently. And we kind of limit ourselves to a certain amount based upon that fund balance.
And I understand that, and I think that you do have to look at all of that. Certainly if it's costing you more to maintain a vehicle than it's worth, it's time to get rid of it. I get all of that. But what I'm saying is there any way to change or to make that fund less each year? I mean, I just feel like we're replacing vehicles, multiple vehicles every single year. I don't know how to word it better. I think that we should keep our vehicles longer. I don't know what else to say. I don't want to get into all the mix of it. I think that the vehicles could be kept longer, and I guess I'm just going to leave it at that.
For the 701 account, and I'm not sure if that's specifically what you're talking about, the fire department replaces their vehicles in a different time, and the police department replaces their vehicles on a 3-year basis, I believe. We had the vehicle and equipment fund is a 701, and they had 400,000 for 25, 26, 430,000 for 27, 425,000 for 28, and 430,000 for 29. And if you take a look, let's take, for example, I'll just grab your 2026. We have a single axle snowplow that we're looking at replacing. The age is 27 years old. It's got 102,000 miles on it. It has a replacement score. We put replacement scores on them, and it's an expected cost of about $275,000. We have a 3/4 ton pickup truck with a service body on it. That's 13 years old with 130,000 miles on it, and it's got a replacement score of 33 at about $80,000. And then a 3/4 ton pickup truck for the Parks Department, and it's 16 years old with over 104,000 miles on it, and replacement score 32 at about 55,000. So what we do is we kind of rate those, and the replacement score is kind of how we determine what's the most current need for that fund. And so we're not replacing those vehicles in a really in a quick manner. They're usually living 15 to 20 plus years. Now, police cars are I'll let the police department and the fire department talk about their 2 units, so.
First of all, I mean, it's a valid point, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about it because the police department's in a little bit different realm, and we really learned this lesson pretty hard the last year or so. During COVID, we weren't able to get vehicles, which allowed us to stretch out our vehicles a little bit, or forced us to stretch out our vehicles a little bit longer, and we kept about an extra year or maybe 2 than what we normally do. What we found is that the vehicles they were down most of the time. Our vehicles run 24/7, so it gets a lot of the hours are high rather than the miles sometimes. But in the 3 years, we generally reach that 100,000 mile mark. That's when we lose our warranties and everything like that, where our cost starts to increase and the breakdowns start to increase as well. Adding to that, we have our fleet right now. Dodge has issues with their motors. We've blown up motors constantly because it doesn't circulate oil when it idles. So all of that's been covered through warranty. However, if we keep this fleet, we're going to be stuck holding the bag with those eventually when they do fail again, which they will. That's a unique situation. That's a flaw. We're getting different motors in them now. So I think that's going to cycle itself out eventually once we get rid of the 8 cylinders. But in addition to that, the maintenance in our vehicles is a little bit more important because of the emergency mode that we have to travel. And we have to have vehicles that stay in good shape. And to do that, we found that this 3-year mark is about the best that we can do it, get the best bang for our buck, keep the warranties, and cycle them out. Now, our detective side is a little bit different. We used to replace those every year. We've cycled those out now every other year. And it's possible we could entertain maybe moving that every 3rd year. So it would save a little bit. On the CIP that I proposed to you, we have, if you'll notice, I believe it's on our even years is when we have been buying the detective vehicles. So that's why that price increase is quite a bit there. So, okay.
So your thought process is the only corrective thing you are suggesting is possibly moving the detective vehicles out to 3 years. And I mean, I understand everything you're saying, and I'm not trying to dispute it or anything like that. I'm just trying to figure out a way to, to do the best that we can do with this budget and with this CIP. And I know the story is probably much the same for the fire department. These are safety issues and things like that, and warranties and all that kind of stuff. But, anywhere we could. So if we could push the detective vehicles out to 3 years, then I guess I would suggest doing that.
Okay, duly noted.
I can quickly speak just on the apparatus replacement that we have at the fire department. For fire apparatus, we're looking at approximately 20 to 25 years. And that's on the large fire trucks. That would be everything with an aerial. When our ladder truck, which is the biggest one, it has a 100-foot aerial on it. We look at 25 to 30 years for that vehicle. We try to be cognizant of the CIP process as we're doing that and try to fit it in where we can. in that process within those years and those parameters. For the ambulances, we're looking at about 15 years for replacement on those. By the time they usually get to the end of their life, service life, they usually have a lot of problems with them, and we really don't see any resale on any of those vehicles. But we do try to retain them for a longer period of time. The only vehicles that have a little bit quicker turnaround, and that is our cars. We call them a car, they're actually an F-250, but those vehicles are station vehicles, and we try to replace those. We're trying to move to a 5 to 7 year replacement and can stretch it out to 10 if we need to. So that's the replacement policy we have.
Okay, so all of your ambulances you keep for 25 years, you said?
15 years.
15 years, I'm sorry. So the ones that we're, like this one that we're replacing now, I'm presuming is at least 15 years old.
Is at least 15 years old, yes.
Okay, and then
Coming
you
right up
have
on
one
that.
then in a couple of years again on the CIP. And
That
so
is
I would
correct.
imagine that one's then becoming that. How big of a lifespan do we have between our newest, which will be brand new, obviously, and our oldest one?
Currently, because we didn't have a good rotation policy before this for our vehicles, being station vehicles, or are we talking ambulances?
Ambulances.
Approximately 15 years would be the longest span of time in those. So we, like I said, we try to keep those on a 15-year replacement cycle.
Right, so
And-
how old is our not the one that we're replacing this year, but the next oldest one, how old is that one?
I want to say that one was purchased in 2004.
Okay. So that's,
2004 or 5. I would have to
and
look
you're not
back.
replacing that for another 3 years in the CIP, or 2 or 3?
That was the one that was actually purchased a year ago, but we're waiting 2 years to
Okay.
actually get that vehicle. So
Okay, so we
that's
have,
another problem we run into in the fire service is
Yeah.
we're anywhere from 3 to 4 years out just on receiving a vehicle. We purchased it this year, and we purchased engine 4 this year, and it won't be delivered till 2026 or 2027, depending on when that build cycle comes in. So we're looking at 3-year projected cost.
okay, so we have one ambulance on order, just waiting for it to get here. Then you have another one for the 2025 CIP that you want to order.
Correct.
It'll take a couple years to get here, clearly. And then you have a third one a few years later.
That is correct.
Okay, so then can we talk about your F-250s?
Yes.
So how many of those could you push out a little bit quicker, longer than 7 years? Do you have,
Well,
what do you have?
The F-250s were just recently purchased. We put them on a cycle.
Mhm.
So those will probably be, we're looking at 5 to 7 years on those, is what we were looking for a delayed process before we would look at replacement on those.
Mhm.
And obviously looking at the mileage it would be on those, and then kind of trying to determine how that's going to fit in the CIP. So we'd have between a 5 to 10 year span.
But didn't we have one in the CIP already, like for $113,000?
That would be this one. So the one that we're asking to replace, that's a
Yeah.
2006 on that vehicle.
Okay,
So that one is 2006. Last year, I had a bunch of repair costs that had to go back into that vehicle.
Gotcha.
So that vehicle is meeting its upper threshold. And in fact, that particular model with that motor had a lot of problems with it. So that's where we had to, they call it bulletproof, but we had to replace the top end of the engine.
okay, all right.
So, I mean, it kind of adds up, and we've tried to retain that vehicle, and I believe that one was purchased under a grant at that time. That was from some of the 2001 funds that came out. We utilized those funds to purchase that vehicle.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Just a couple quick points. First of all, definitely respect your comment about the replacement schedule. I think you and others brought this up a couple of years ago. We don't want to be just saying, well, this vehicle has a 10-year useful life. So on day 1 of year 11, we're going to go out and replace it. I mean, I believe that I talked about this with department heads, and I'm not talking about the public safety departments. They have their own, issues to deal with the vehicles they have to maintain, but that we take a look at the maintenance schedule, the number of miles, the condition of the vehicle, take all that into account before we just put that on the list. So in other words, if a vehicle still has useful life, just because it's got a 10-year life according to the manufacturer, we want to get more out of it than that. I think that's your main point. And we want to keep an eye on that. If you see something from the notes that come through on those 701 items that doesn't make sense, please tell us, because we're not looking to rush it out the door and buy a new one as soon as the manufacturer's useful life has ended.
Great.
That's an important point.
I mean, I do want to commend the streets department because they do give us, they're the only ones I think that give us this, but they give us their fleet,
Maintenance.
their fleet replacement plan. So that makes it a lot easier to look at. So I do appreciate that. And I just wanted to say that thank you for putting that in there.
Thank you. The other thing I want a quick note, I see there's other people want to speak, but going back to the earlier question about the timing of the police department relocation on the agenda here, the thought is this. When if you adopt the CIP tonight, you recommend it to be approved at an upcoming council meeting is what you're doing. You're not actually adopting it tonight. Again, it's a blueprint. It's the long-range plan. If you decided tonight on this agenda item, you know what? No way in the world am I going to support a $10 million plan to relocate the police department to the Buffalo building. You might as well tell us now. If you're like, well, yeah, I'm interested in that, let's keep it in. The next item on the agenda is intended to say, okay, let's start evaluating it. Let's start digging in deeper, have questions addressed and answered, get a better idea of what that process would look like, what things would have to be put in place to make it happen, what concerns you have about it. You might ultimately not vote for it anyway, but if there's no interest at all in that item, and you say, well, let's take it off now, we would plan on doing the other maintenance items or other projects that are needed at the current station. It's kind of a checkpoint, literally a checkpoint.
Alderman Wagner?
Oh, thank you. Wow, that one question, I just jotted down what happened with the one question. We went to 7 places, 7 different topics during that discussion. And there are a lot of things there I need to understand a little better. The first one is Jennifer she talked about a soft approval. Jennifer, can you tell me what a soft approval means?
It's just another terminology for what Steve was just describing, whereby what we're looking for tonight is here's the blueprint. If you're generally in favor of all these items, then we will work them into the budget. I will come back to you at a future meeting with how this will look in our debt schedules. And from there, once it's in the budget, that is what I'll refer to as the final approval. So this is the document, whatever you decide to approve. So if you want to redline some items, we'll take that to note. We'll build what is approved at this meeting or the next one, and build those into the budget for your final approval in November.
Yeah, to add to that, and that's well described by Jennifer, Ed, if we get to the fall, we're not going to hit you over the head with a club saying you approved back in late June that these were all going to be passed in the budget process. But what you're really doing at that point is directing us to include them in the proposed 2020-25 budget, the items that are for next year, with the idea that obviously finances may come into play and things may be dropped at the budget stage, but you're giving us direction to include these items into our plans.
The thing that I think bothers me is this document is supposed to tell the public what priorities we're willing to fund over the next 1 to 5 years. And I understand that. The problem is I don't think I've ever seen us stick with it. And that, I'm looking at what's going to happen for 2024 or 2025. And what is going to happen is we're going to raise our borrowing it's up to $10 million on 1 year and then $6 million on the next, and then it goes down to about $4 million for the next 3 years. I don't want to trigger Mrs. Spiros, but we don't have any money. And I've heard her say this a few times, and it's true. We are spending almost beyond our means, and I just want to say that I would, if I were doing anything I would redline, it would probably redline borrowing back in general, back to the 3.5 million, because that's what our consultant told us that we could live with. Now he didn't tell us we could live with 6 million. He didn't tell us we could live with 10 million. That's the kind of thing that we got to work on. The other thing I just want to make a quick comment about, I think it was Mr. O'Reilly wondering where the audit went. Yeah, me too. And I think that's something that, I think this is a little unusual for us to not have received at least a draft copy of it by this time of the year. we're almost halfway done with the year. Okay, but I want to leave that. The other thing, I don't want us to, what I call catch the fever. We have that building out there, and it was donated to us. And it's basically, I forget what it was like $17,000 a year or something like that in taxes that would get off of that building. And we're bleeding those numbers now, but there's no other big reason why we have to get panicked. And that's where the fever comes in. We don't want the fever to build a new police station to overtake our means to build a new police station. I think it's something we should look at and we should work with. And as Derek mentioned, at the time that we decided to accept this thing, he said that what you've got to look at is this is an asset that you can sell, that you can do anything you want with. And he was right. He's still right. And I don't doubt him one little bit. I don't know. I'm a little bit on the same boat as Mrs. Spiros, in the sense that I do feel this is cart before the horse, but I don't think I've ever seen it adhered to in any way. I mean, every time, a good example of that is every time we get a wonderful citizen who wants to leave a legacy behind and he wants to make a donation to something, guess what? That becomes a priority and everything else is shoved to the rear. I think we got to have some rules. We got to have some law and order on this thing. And I don't know how to imply that law and order at this moment. Anyway, those are just my thoughts as we've gone along here in the first hour of bloodletting, I guess. Anyway, thank you for the time.
Just real briefly, thanks for the comments. I'm not going to address the borrowing issue right now. We have run the plan past our financial advisor from Ellers, and we could discuss that. I know there's other people lined up to bring up questions. I want to touch real briefly, though, on the police relocation topic, though. I mean, we're not trying to rush the council at all, but we have had the building in our possession now for 6 months, and I think what we're trying to do is take your temperature as to the appetite, potentially, for this project. Because if it turns out there is no appetite at all, we'd be foolish to sit on this endlessly, and we'd be smarter to quite frankly, find a private buyer and sell it to a commercial entity and get taxes on coming into us. I'm not suggesting that at all, but I think it's at the point where we feel at staff level, we need to start probing and finding out how serious the council would be with some further evaluation about moving ahead with the relocation and have that decision kind of drive where things go next.
Alderman Werman?
All right. So I've got a couple of notes here based on a lot of the comments made tonight. Number one, I think to everyone's point, I think it does feel a little backwards. I know that this is how we've done it, but I think what we really need to establish with these meetings is that we probably need to have more than just what we're having. So I think what we should be looking at and approving now is essentially, like Mike said, this is a wish list. So we should be reviewing whether or not we think these projects are worth pursuing, whether it's next year or in 5 years. I think that needs to be meeting number one. And then I think once we establish a little bit more about the budget, we need to revisit and reprioritize based on what we have financially available. The other thing I think about these meetings is that we don't really seem to talk about the cost. We're very high level. We're looking at the projects and saying, here's what the project is. And then we kind of get to challenge it based on the cost, but we should be looking at this as a whole. Because I think one thing that I would say, as we've kind of dealt with this whole restroom issue and some of the fits that have been thrown about that, is that people don't understand where the money is coming from. So we're talking about a lot of these projects. Some of these could be grants. Some of these are, private donations. We're not highlighting any of that. So now it just sounds like we're spending, what is the first year, 21 million, I mean? What were we projecting? I mean, it's a crazy amount, but we're not accounting for the fact that, I think, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure streets, a good chunk of that goes away from like DOT grants and stuff that we can't anticipate, but we know it's not all going to be spent. So I think we're kind of, again, to everybody's point, getting a little ahead of ourselves in that, and we're not explaining it well. So I think we need to establish that these meetings need to really be to approve the wish list, and then we need to come back and reevaluate once we have a little bit more numbers to put behind it. In addition, I think in terms of like the police building, I think if you're gauging temperature, I would say like for me, I'm absolutely interested. I think it's a great idea. We have a building that's just sitting there. $10 million is a lot of money. I think what we need to be looking at is if we really want to pursue this, we should be phasing it out. How can we do this realistically instead of just saying we have 2 years that we're going to borrow $5 million? What does that mean? We should be looking at how we can phase that. I know we looked at a lot of different conceptual plans and there's a lot of really cool features in there. What can we start doing to start transferring them over? Do we just put like their shooting practice area in there so that they can utilize both parts of the buildings? They can send people over there temporarily. I mean, there's things that we could be doing instead of sitting on it. And I think that's our problem. We either sit on something or we jump in head first and then we find ourselves underwater. And then I think the last thing that I wanted to point out is, especially with the abolishment of the Economic Development Board, we had a really cool little exercise that we did when we found out we were getting extra money from the state, where we had to prioritize what we wanted to spend money on as a council and what we were going to do with that extra money. And I think that's one thing we are lacking here significantly is I have no idea what the hell to do with any of the money that we're looking at for these projects. I don't know where that money should go. Do we want to focus on economic development? Because then, as much as I really love a police building, I don't know that that's the right move. We have a ton of parks that need renovations. We have other things that would bring people into the city. Is that where we want our focus to be? So I think we need to establish some core values as a council and what we want the city to be over the next 5 years instead of just looking at projects. And that would be my final thought.
Alderman Stauber?
Thank you. Couple of comments. One, a follow-up to Alderman O'Reilly's concern about not having the audit. I do recall the conversation, and I asked about an MD&A until we have an audit, a final audit, and I thought that was doable. Is that still something we could expect before the actual audit is available?
Forgive me, I thought I sent it out. So if I did not, or if I did not include it in a packet, I will get it to you after this meeting, but I thought I had provided that. So if I overlooked actually providing it to you, I apologize.
Okay, I don't remember seeing it. So thank you. Regarding the machinery and equipment fund, page 154, Ms. Bertucci or Steve, what is the source for that fund? And I seem to recall that when we have projects, sometimes the vehicle use is, a portion of the vehicle use is associated to the project cost. Could you break down a little bit at a high level where the funds come from?
Okay, so when we take and use a piece of equipment for digging sanitary sewers or doing work on a project, let's say we're doing sanitary sewers like we did on Depot and Chestnut here this summer. The equipment that we're using, the pickup trucks, the backhoes, the dump trucks, and everything else, the rental charge for using that equipment, we have an hourly rate for each of the pieces of equipment or mileage rate for each of the pieces of equipment. That gets billed back to the account that work is being done for. So in that instance, so that wastewater doesn't have to own any of that vehicles, they basically rent it from us. It goes into a proprietary fund, and that fund then, we maintain that fund, and that fund is what is used to purchase vehicles for replacement. I remember many years ago that this fund was a lot more solvent than it is today, because I think they purchased something very large out of it that really wasn't a vehicle that was being charged. It was just a regular 101 vehicle, and it did not get charged. It was not a type of vehicle that got charged back, so they basically brought the value of that account down. But basically that value is there. So if we're doing projects like mill and place projects or something like that where we're using equipment, that equipment gets charged to those projects. For example, our survey vehicles, if we're using a survey vehicle on a project, the miles for that vehicle get charged to that project.
So not that we're playing a shell game or anything, but legitimately some of the cost for the vehicle equipment fund is paid by taxes, some is paid by
fees
that you might achieve.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to get an idea you know, vehicle equipment fund overall is like 80% non-taxed or 80% tax, you know?
It'd be hard to say because each year might be a little bit different. I know if we do something for the water utility, they'll get a bill from us for using our equipment. And it basically goes back and forth for that. So it's just a way of keeping that fund solvent. And it's a true cost of what it actually costs to build that. So if you were to take and do a street but not put any equipment towards it, you're really not having apples to apples if you bid that same street out and have it built by a contractor, because he's got to put his costs for that equipment into that process.
Okay, and one final question then. When we look at projects by funding source, I look at page 2 and trying to draw a correlation between what we just talked about and project by funding source. And I guess there is nothing on page 2 that would make that connection, is there, Tom? This is page 2 of your revised.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, it does not show the 701 account in that, in the fee structures there.
Yeah, you know what I'm getting at, though.
Yeah, I know what you're getting at.
Clean Water Fund, donation, private funds, EMS, wastewater. I just don't see the, you know, on the surface, it might look like the vehicle equipment fund is 100% tax supported. I don't think that's the case, and you just confirmed it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alderman Tompkins?
Thank you. So I have 2 questions. One, Jennifer, when we do sort of get the move from the soft approval to the, you know, final approval, especially when we're talking about the police station, it would be really helpful. I think you had sort of mentioned that if we borrow $10 million, it looks like potentially we're putting $1 million extra on the tax.
Correct.
So it would be really important for us to get 2 numbers. How much taxes would increase for a $150,000 property and a $200,000 property, or 250. If we could get 2 of those, so we could kind of compare and just see, like, if we didn't borrow 10,000 or 10 million, you know, a home of 150,000 would have this much tax. But if we did, it would be this much, and then this. That would be super helpful because it just helps us talk to people. And then, so thank you, Jody, for saying that you'll look into the 3 years for the detective vehicles. I think that was a great idea. If we take on a lot for a building, this is just, I think it would be great if we could have, if possible, there could just be a little flex in other things in the police department, if possible. So I don't know if that, you know, is it possible not to have as many vehicles in the fleet or something, or a change in structure, anything like that, just to sort of be able to sort of absorb a building would be great. So those are my 2 comments.
Alderman Varsho?
I'm having a lot of fun tonight. I agree with Mr. O'Reilly. It seems sometimes 3 to 4 or 5 years from now, it's a wish list, but it is. That's what this document is. It's a fluid document. We used to go through this the first week in May.
Yeah.
So, but there are projects like Mr. Turchi does, that he has grants out there, the 80-20 split for a total reconstruction that's 3 years down the road, that he's got to wait for that. That's not a fluid. That's going to be there. Mm-hmm. I want Fifth Street done. I drive up and down it every day. Won't be done till next year now. 26. It was supposed to be next year. Now it's 2026 because he got some funding for it. And I agree with Mr. Werman. Yes, this year, having some budget numbers to see what we could prioritize would be nice. But again, it's a fluid document. It's great things to see. It's nice to see projects that we want to fulfill the next 5 years. Seeing this, we could look at last year's CIP plan, and I'm sure we didn't do everything from 24 that we planned on doing when we finalized the budget. So I agree with everybody. It's just, what do? Do you move the CIP to after the budget?
so that everything that we approve in the budget is in 2024, so it makes us feel better? I mean, I don't know. I enjoy going through the 5-year plan. I enjoy seeing, what possibilities could be done in the city. It's just, when it comes to budget time, if some things have to be moved, some things got to be cut, then we move them, we cut them, we move them to 1 year, we push one back, we move one forward if we can afford to. I was surprised that we were doing this so late in June, because we used to do it first week in May.
Yeah.
Mr. Turchi.
I'm going to apologize for that, because I've been working on some other projects and we're a little bit short-staffed, but my plan was to do it in May, but things got carried away. And it is a planning tool. Again, we're trying to make sure that we fit projects, fit everyone's needs from the various different departments over a 5-year period of time. I remember when we used to use the current year plus just go to like 24 to 28, we decided about 2 or 3 years ago that the 24 projects, since they're already in the budget, there's no reason to talk about those again, and move from 25 to 29. So it was a situation where we're trying to make sure that we're planning and keeping a level tax rate over the years, so we're not bouncing up and down. And that's one of the reasons why we use this tool too.
Yeah. And I completely agree with Mr. Werman, but I can't sit down with every department head to figure out what they need to do. They do this 40 hours a week, if not more. I do that somewhere else, and I would, bringing this document to show us that, at least helps out. If we have any questions, we can talk to the department heads individually or do something like that. And my last comment is we have to figure something out for the police department. I mean, don't get me wrong. I understand if it's not that building, it has to be something else. They are busting at the seams in that small little building that they have. We have to figure, and do we want to stick any more money into that building that was built when?
Yeah. 84.
Yeah.
Do we want to?
81 or 80, I think.
Do we want to stick any more money into a building
That isn't even.
that's there?
It's not worthy.
So,
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Tom.
All right, so, boy, I'm starting to lose my train of thought. But no, you're absolutely right. When we put all these together, it is a wish list, and it's a wish list that all the department and division heads put together. And when we come down and just start doing our individual meetings, we realize, we're not meeting the goals that we had set for ourselves. Therefore, we as a team sit down, go through the process. What can we push off? What can we do to try to keep these numbers as close as possible what the goal is that we've had that was set by previous councils. So it's basically, we're all working as a team. There were many items that either got moved to different years to balance, or were even moved out just in order to keep this plan fluid.
Well, I want to go back to Councilmember Werman's comments. Derek, I'm right with you on the idea of some planning with goal setting and the bigger topic. In fact, council and staff really should work on that. Staff would love to get council to that point, because your insight in terms of where you want to take the city and what areas need help, do we want to, are parks in need or streets more in need, whatever, and some of the things. We've done strategic planning over the years. Those of you who've been on council for a while know that we did it back in 2015 and 2016 in the old city hall down in the basement before regular meetings. That didn't get us real far. We've had 2 times now that staff has done a strategic plan. It's been staff-driven, council approved, but staff-driven. 3-year plans, 2019 to 2021 and 2022 to 2024. But I think the value of those is muted by the fact that, the process maybe wasn't involving all of us in this room right now. And the fact of the matter is, if you don't follow up on it and keep track of it, what have we done in 2022? What's still left for 2023? And because of staffing shortages and other things, COVID was a real killer for a while too. We've just been treading water more than anything. We go back and look at the list periodically and say, oh gosh, we still haven't gotten to this goal. But I think the council and staff need to do a more meaningful, higher level. I know our agendas are filled with countless items, but to get to that point where there is an overarching plan, I think that's what you're sort of advocating for. And then that will guide the budget. That will guide the CIP. We're spending money here because that's an identified goal that we want to work toward, instead of, kind of trying to wing it. Staff really sometimes is trying to figure out what council wants, and that's a hard thing to do as well.
Alderman Wagner?
Thank you. I just from the discussion that's going on here between Mr. Berman, Mr. Barg, Mr. Churchy, and others. I think I would feel much more comfortable if we had a draft budget, if we tried to figure out how much money we had to spend. And I think Jennifer said something about trying different types of funding mechanisms for melding the budget and the CIP. I think maybe that would be the way I'd feel more comfortable if we said, okay, here's the amount of money we've got to spend. Here are our priorities. Let's see how we can divvy up those priorities in relation to those projects. I think maybe that's the way we need to go. Because again, we've gone through this exercise. We understand what everybody needs. Now it's time to, start on the budget process. Matter of fact, you usually start the budget process about a month before this. I think we have to find a different way of doing this. Sitting here and bouncing them around without any clear path of where we were going is just not productive. Just not productive at all. Thank you for the time.
Alderman Marshall?
I'm going to respond to Mr. Wagner. I, for one, don't get me wrong, I enjoy coming here and seeing everybody. I am not going to sit here for 3 meetings a week in September and October and November to do a CIP and a budget at the same time. Because that's what we're looking at.
Yep.
We're looking at 2 or 3 meetings a week to sit here and figure out what everybody wants to do with the CIP and then try to fit it into the budget. Then the following week, we have to figure it out again. We would be here for 6 to 8 meetings a month for 2 months. I mean, I understand what Mr. Wagner's saying, I really do. And Mr. Weirman, to kind of pair these together for that first year. 2025, we're going to be doing the budget. We have all the projects that are sitting out there. I understand that, but I'm not going to sit here for 2 months for 2 extra meetings, 3 extra meetings, 4 extra meetings, so that we can try to pair these 2 documents together.
Alderman Tompkins?
When we're talking about how much money do we have to spend in the CIP, I think what we really need to say is how much money can we borrow? Because the budget is where we're spending the money and the CIP is when we're borrowing. So it might be helpful to look at it in a sense of property tax, because what we borrow does go on top of our property tax. So maybe next year when we do the CIP, we should say, this is a CIP for what Mr. Wagner said of $3.5 million, and this is what the property tax would be to pay this off. This is a CIP for 4.5, and this is, because that's really what it comes down to, is we want to know how much property tax, because we can borrow, we've got a range that we can borrow. So really, as the representatives, we want to know how much does this affect property tax.
Alderman Weirman?
Well, we're halfway there, maybe. I think we've hit a lot of points tonight, and not that I want to shorten up a discussion that's definitely important, but really, realistically, I'm going to ask, what's our next step? Because I think, like I said, as a council, I really think we need to come back and probably prioritize what our values are going to be for the future planning. Doesn't mean we can't approve, quote unquote, soft approve the CIP here, but I do think that's going to be a big next step for us, is to, and even if we can go back, Chess, I don't know if you're able to go back to those minutes when we got that extra state funding. I think there was 6 categories, and it was hey, you need to figure out where you would want to prioritize these buckets. That's something I think that we would need to do to figure out what we're going to do next.
Agreed.
Alderman Spiros?
Well, one thing that Steve said, and I think this is true, is with the strategic planning. I was here when we did the strategic planning, and we did it in the basement, and we focused a lot on what our motto was going to be and this kind of stuff. There was a lot of calligraphy all over the chalkboard, but we didn't get anything done. I mean, I don't even know if we changed our motto. Maybe we did. I don't remember because it's so long ago.
No.
So the way that I would think of strategic planning being more effective would be to go through each department and say, what are our goals for each department? And because I think that's something people can grasp and hold on to. And maybe the meetings wouldn't be that long if you just took one department, whatever, a month or whatever, and you just tacked it on. I think that's just something that's more easily grasped. If you take a department and you say, look, what are our goals for, the street department? Do we need to put more money in mill in place? And can we? Are we getting tons of complaints about the roads? And is this something that we need to do? Do we look at parks and do we say, do we really need every single park that we have? Is there any that are not used very often or that are in inconvenient places? Or, and I think it's just an easier way to do it, rather than the way that we tried to do it a few years ago. I think it was a valiant effort. I just don't know that much came of it.
It probably didn't help that I led it. I thought I could lead it, but a couple things. One, I wanted to have a little input myself, and secondly, I'm not a professional. But we did start off. No, I know you're not criticizing.
Yeah, no, I don't.
I know that. But you're right. But we did start out fairly lofty, and I think that's what you're saying.
Okay, to Alderman Werman's question, where do we go from here? Do we approve this tonight? Do we wait till the council meeting in 2 weeks?
Yeah, all you would really be doing, this is what we've done historically. This might sound weird, but all you've done after the second CIP meeting is recommend approval of the CIP with whatever changes you've made along the way or whatever one staff has come up with, and you're sending it to a regular meeting for possible consideration of approval. And that's still a soft approval. And again, to expound on what Jennifer was saying earlier, we're not holding you to it. It's not going to be put up in the building the next time you walk in on the wall and you better do this or else. It's basically saying it's a guidebook. This is our intent. These are our priorities. We realize when we get to October, the 2025, a couple of those items might have to come off because of budgetary reasons. So, but that would be the intent, is to send a document that you say, yep, that looks like our reasonable priorities with what we have to work with right now and the borrowing ideas that have been put before us. Maybe ultimately you want to trim that back, but for now, this is the best plan we have, and we want to give it a level of approval.
Alderman Stauber?
To move things forward, I would make a motion that we pass the proposed CIP to the full council for consideration.
Alderman Spiros?
I'm gonna second that actually, because of what Brian said. This is a fluid document, so always remember that. We can do this approval and things can change, and they will change when the budget comes up. So I don't have a big issue with that either. I do think it's important to have the police department conversation.
Yes, ma'am.
But aside from that, I'm fine with that.
So we have a motion and a second on the table. Any other discussion? Seeing no other discussion, please vote.
Mr. Wagner?
Nay.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item G, I'm sorry that we just did that. Oh my goodness sakes, I didn't check.
That's all right.
Item H, discuss plans for further evaluation of the police department relocation. If that project is included, the approved motion noted on agenda item G.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, I don't expect to go real far with this right now tonight, but we've talked at staff level, some of us at our meetings, about the fact that if in fact this is going to be embraced where $10 million, if it all comes together, it makes sense, is something you're interested in looking at, boiling down further, seeing if it's a plan that you can buy into, this is going to take some work. Almost every project you looked at tonight was really just, it is what it is. We're going to buy this piece of equipment for $150,000. This is way more complicated than that. You've received the ADCI report. I think it was very well done. But now, what would it take in terms of planning steps to answer your questions, to bake it further, to get the plan more refined and people to either buy into it or ultimately say that they can't. But we want to start with, we want your blessing really to start planning at staff level, how to bring those next steps to you, how to work through an analysis of this and determine whether or not you really feel this project should be a go. So I'm not looking for any motion right now. I'm just looking for your consensus that you are on board with a process to really do a deeper dive and look at what it would take to get this thing actually moving forward, if that's your decision.
Alderman Varsho?
Okay, so I was gonna make a motion, but you don't need a motion tonight. Well, what I was thinking is that you could present us with those plans that we had. Get those to us before the July 9th meeting. You shoot an email out to us so we can all look over those plans. And then have this as a agenda item before we vote on the CIP. So we can look through those plans, chat about them, talk to it, and see after that if that is all at all possible to do that.
First of all, you can make a motion if you want to. And secondly, I think if it'd be okay, maybe I'd like to move that entire thing back to July 23rd then. We have a lot of items already piled up on July 9th that are carryovers from the last meeting with several big issues. So I think you might get overwhelmed. If that's your purview, we'll set it all up for July 23rd.
And then the CIP vote as well then?
If you want to do it that way.
Have them both the same night? So we discuss the police station first, and then we can discuss the CIP at the end. And I would be very helpful. I would be happy with that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Alderman Varsho. Is there a second? Then we will get to everyone else's questions. Okay, Alderman Weigel seconds that. Now we will go to Alderman Giles, who is number 2, but is number 1, so you're number 2 right now. How's that?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Mr. Varsho had said earlier. There's definitely a need for a new police station. Back when I did the tour, walking through those narrow halls, there so much needs to be changed. So I'm on board with going ahead and exploring those options.
Alderman Spiros?
So just a couple of things. I think I wasn't paying close attention. Is there a new plan for this building? Like, has it been drawn out? Is there, do we have that yet, or have I seen that and forgot it? And I'm asking this in all seriousness because I feel like I don't remember it.
That's fine.
Oh, that's a fair question. What we're looking at is using those conceptual plans as a launching point, adjusting them, adding things, deleting things, and using that kind of as just a launching point to move forward.
So who will be doing that, and when will that be ready? Will that be ready in July?
Yeah, well, I think, maybe we're talking about two different things, because if we move forward with the blueprint and design, that's the plan that we would do with architects and to move forward that way. So we would have to have you folks decide if we could move forward with that before we can do it. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
So here's the dilemma I'm having. So we have numbers in the CIP attached to the new police station, but we don't really know what it's going to cost, not really. And so that's sort of the problem I'm having, especially seeing how much construction cost has gone up over the last couple of years. So I don't know when that's going to fall into the conversation, but I think that's like super important to know what it's actually going to cost you and what it looks like and what you're getting for your money. And then and I know you don't have that answer. I mean, you just gave me the answer. And then the second thing I wanted to say is I think that Alderperson Tompkins hit on a really good point, that I think it's really, really important to say, look, if we borrow $10 million this year, this is how much it's going to affect a home of $100,000. I think that's super, super important part of this conversation.
Alderman Tompkins?
So I'm wondering if this would work for a July 26th meeting. I think you said 26th, 3rd. could we potentially be presented with 3 possibilities? I know you don't have architectural plans and all of that, but to sort of say ballpark, if we renovated the building, ballpark, we're looking at potentially this many million. If we use the Buffalo building, ballpark, we're looking at this much, but we need to approve the $800,000 architectural plans to start that process. Or if we did this in stages, this would be what stage 1, 2, and 3 is, and potentially this would be the money. I think that would help us make a decision, because then we could say, we're looking at this. I mean, yeah, we're not going to have, there's just so much we won't have. And I know you're just asking us, start the race. Like you're saying, let's figure out what path we're going down and start that path. So if I'm seeing 3 paths, and I think we need to pick what path. So if you could give us information to help us, that would be helpful.
Yes, Tom, go ahead.
All right, ADCI did a conceptual analysis. I think they had 3 different designs. They talked about a totally new building and whether or not we stay in the current building. So what I think we should do is at the July 23rd meeting, I'm going to take and work with the chief, and we'll get the presentation back up, maybe even have them come and talk again and give that presentation so that brings you back up to speed, because we did that probably about 6 months ago at the community center, if you remember. We had the big bulletin boards with them, and I would imagine they're still sitting in Jody's office yet, so he's staring at them constantly. So we'll do that on the 23rd and rehab what we've gone through already.
In preparation for that, does everybody still have the book they got back then? If you don't, let us know. Okay.
Do not.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. Do we have any extra copies? Extra copies. So if you don't, yeah.
We can also email out a PDF copy again.
Yeah,
if you'd like.
right, that'd be good too.
That's better.
Yeah, and that really is the starting point. As Tom said, there were 3 different outlines there. And if you want, that meeting we could do one of our 5 o'clock and then have the regular meeting be at 6 o'clock. Because I think a good hour would be nice to be able to go through this and get people refamiliarized with that.
Idea.
With this.
Perfect,
Okay.
perfect. Alderman Werman?
Yeah, first of all, I think that's wrong. I don't think they're in Jody's office. I'm guessing they're at his house and it's like manifesting everything. He just gets up and he's like, we're going to do this. They're in the life.
Probably.
No, I was going to say, I think the writing is on the wall, or as Ms. Spiro said, the calligraphy is on the wall. I think what we are trying to do here is really evaluate actually doing this.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest component, and I know I kind of briefly mentioned this before, is it possible to phase this out? If we can't borrow $5 million the next 2 years, can we do smaller chunks? And I think if I can ask a favor, it's going to be if the police department, maybe it's just Jody, but if any of you can really look at this and say, what could realistically be done at the Buffalo building if we decided to renovate that we wouldn't need at the main police department, or you could have both, but that way we could do it in smaller chunks. But I think we are not going to understand the police responsibilities to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, anything's possible, obviously. It may not be the most convenient way, but it's possible. I think ADCI might be able to help us with some of that. They understand the construction process and what we could do, but I mean, I'm sure there's a way.
So we have a motion on the floor and a second. Any other comments? Seeing none, since we have a motion, we can vote.
Mr. Wagner?
Nay.
That motion passes. Thank you. Item I, adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin Statute, Chapter 19.851E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Development agreement for project located within TIF District number 15. We have a motion on the floor by Alderman Varsho, second by Alderman Werman to go into closed session. Please vote.
Mr. Wagner?
Aye.
We are in closed session.